What up, everybody? Welcome to Music Blueprint. I am so excited to be here, mainly because I have my awesome cousin who is going to talk about so many things. Photography, marketing, all the hats you wear is just crazy. And I know that you have a lot of knowledge that our listeners would be really interested about. So
cool.
Why don't you just start off and just tell us a little bit about yourself? And I didn't even say your name. Micah Suarez, let's go. Or Micah Boo Boo Booth. But yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself and all that jazz.
Yeah, well, my name is Micah Suarez. I am a lot of things. First and foremost, I'm a wife and a mother. I've got a little 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and then another one on the way.
We just saw the little picture today of the little sea monkey.
Yeah, at this point.
Yeah, the little mini alien that's there.
So that keeps me busy, but I also work full-time at Turning Point Church, and I work with their worship team there. I lead worship, and I also teach music classes to the whole elementary school, and that includes putting on performances and things like that. I also help with overseeing their social media. I'm responsible for doing all the live stream stuff, covering the AV team.
Right. She has all the hats. And Micah, the reason why I wanted to bring Micah on was she, to me, is what most musicians and most creatives and artists do today. We have multiple avenues of revenue coming in to collectively make our income, right? Like you've got the annual from the church, right? Or the bi-weekly from the church, which that I know has a ton of different hats in it, which we'll definitely get into. But then you also have your little side projects, right? You've got the little dance, what's the little program?
We were doing Triple Threat before COVID hit. Yeah.
Yes.
So we put on like plays
and performances.
And
performances. Then you have your what's it called?
Photography.
Yeah, your photography, which is now ramping up. You've kind of when did you first get your camera?
When I was pregnant with Ava. So
it was less
3.5, 4 years ago.
Dang. Okay, so you got your camera, then got the feel of that, and then turned that into a little side hustle.
Yep.
So Micah just has a lot of different things going on, and we're going to, in this podcast, just talk about all those different things because I feel like you have so many skill sets. And I don't think people really realize sometimes when I just say it by myself that you really do have a lot of hustles going on, and then collectively you've got this like really great income. I think people think for creatives and artists that you just have to have one income, like you clock in 9 to 5 and 5 days a week and that's it. But that's not how it is for creatives. So it's just, I think you're a perfect person. All that to be said. I think you're the perfect person, and I think people are going to get so much out of this. So please stay tuned. It might be a long podcast because we're going to dive into all these different things, but it's going to be really informational and have a lot of great stuff. So why don't you first talk about how you got started in the church? You and I both know we're born into the church.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you were working as a paid person in the church. No. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So my parents are the pastors of Turning Point Church.
You had an easy in.
So PK.
Yeah, PK.
Don't judge. But
right.
So I grew up in the church, and when you're a PK, like, it's not a matter of like, do you want to volunteer, but like, what are you wanting to do? Because you have to do something.
What have you chosen to do?
Right.
Donuts, worship, doesn't matter.
So, I mean, I did a lot of things throughout the years, but worship was something that always really gravitated for me, and something that I felt like I was gifted in and anointed in. So I've been leading worship probably since I was like 14 or
a long
13.
Time.
I don't know. It's been a long time.
I think it was definitely junior high because I remember when I got to junior high on the worship team, you guys, I think, were in high school. So,
Yeah.
and then I remember you guys had already been on the worship team for some time before that, you know, and I remember watching you guys being like, man, I just want to be out there, like, you know, whatever.
Yeah. So, we did that for a lot of years. Ended up going to school actually to become a teacher. I got a liberal studies degree and started teaching at the Christian school there. And my degree was more focused on math. So I became a math teacher, but I also did a few electives like performance arts.
Yeah.
Public speaking. I've done lots of different things. Music, of course. But I did that for a few years. And then I felt God kind of tugging on my heart to go help with a new church plant in Colorado. So I moved to Colorado, and I actually ended up getting hired on there. And that was my first experience working for a church. And not like school, but church. So that was with the church there. And then I worked there for, I think, a little over 2 years.
What was it like? Because the dynamic, at least this is how it felt to me, was working for my family's church was a much different dynamic for me than working at a church where there was like no family there.
Yeah.
What was that like for you having to transition to that? Because now you're working for a church, right? Which you kind of always been working for a church, but working for a parent or for me, an uncle is a much different scenario than working for not complete strangers. I know you knew them to some extent, but basically strangers.
Yeah. Yeah. So at first it was difficult, and I moved out there by myself, like with nothing. So it was hard. You know, you have to work to build relationships and to build a rapport with people. And especially in this line of work, like as in a church setting, I think it's way more involved relationally than a lot of other jobs are.
Totally agree.
So you really have to invest in that, invest in spending time with people and put yourself out there. You can't just show up to work 9 to 5 and like expect that to be the extent of it, you know? So I think once that like trust was built, I had a great boss out there. He was just phenomenal. Tyron Daniel, and a great spiritual leader. And he really like constantly told me like, Micah, I trust you. Like you do what you do best. I'm not going to tell you how to do what I want you to do. Like I want you to do it how you do it. That's why I hired you.
Exactly.
So I loved that.
Yeah.
Just I felt always secure and trusted in that way. And I know that's not the case everywhere, but I was very fortunate in that regard.
And what were you doing out there? What was your for that job? What was the specifics then?
Well, because it was a small church plant, I had to wear many hats.
Like we all know, typical churches. I mean, you guys, there are some big churches that you wear one hat and that's it. You're still dabbling in, let's say if you're a photographer for the church or a media person for the church, you will end up dabbling in like, you take pictures, but also you have to make videos. Like it's not one singular thing. But in a small church setting, you're the marketer, you're the worship leader. If you're a worship leader, you're sometimes a youth pastor. I mean, again, like you said, you're wearing a lot of hats. So just be prepared for that. Okay, continue on.
Right. So I did the finances. I was their full-time secretary throughout the week. That was my main responsibility. Okay. I also led worship and helped facilitate everything with the worship team. I did graphic design.
Which was probably the start of you doing graphic design.
Yes. Yeah, really, it probably was. And I didn't do a ton of it out there. I actually don't even remember ever being involved in the social media aspect at all out there.
Okay.
So
that was a while ago, though. No, not to date you or me, but that was right around the time, if I'm remembering right, where Instagram had just started surfacing. So Facebook and Twitter had been around for maybe 3 to 5 years or so, but they still weren't popping people off yet. Like there was no word influencer. Like that wasn't
no.
a thing. And then Instagram had just came out and people were like, this is interesting.
Right.
Seeing people's life in just picture form. There wasn't even video and a video option for Instagram. It was only picture form. So that makes sense during that time why you wouldn't have, as a marketer, crazy. It was probably dealing more with emails and stuff along those lines.
Yeah. So I think that was pretty much the majority of the stuff that I was doing. But when I moved back out here and started working for my parents' church, I got to pick up a lot more hats along the way.
Right.
And you just start to fill holes. And I think anytime you're working for, anytime you're working in a job and you see it as unto the Lord, God gives you grace for it, and He gives you a desire to always want to do your best,
right,
and to always be helpful, and just seeing like, okay, there's a need there, and if I can fill it, then Lord, teach me and train me and help me to fill it well. So that's happened definitely throughout the years.
Yeah, and I will speak to as well, like I started working at TPC, my uncle's church, Micah's dad's church, and probably, what was that, around maybe April-ish, I think, is when I started coming around, and been just helping them with their worship team, helping them with tech, and kind of just get things off the ground. They hadn't set up an online really live stream or really online presence for the most part. Right. So we were just, Mike and I actually got to tag team a lot, which was great because we're both so busy, especially you've got kids now, like I've got a thriving big career. I'm just kidding. But no, we're both so busy. Life just takes over. And so it's been nice to like work together, but you definitely have to go into if you're going to work for a church and go work for any capacity, you're at a much higher capacity than I am, right? Like you do a lot more day to day. You're basically staff, right?
Right.
Me, on the other hand, I come in on Sundays for the most part. If I'm leading worship, I might have to do some stuff, getting my set together.
Right.
But you have to be very intentful. And this is not just with the church. This is just with anything. You have to be intentful about what can you do.
Right.
Because it's very easy to get involved in anything, but to get involved in church because you have this pull of you want to, do what's right by the Lord. You want to help expand the ministry and reach more people. You have this heart for that. But you have to be aware of what can you do, because if you overreach yourself and feel like that's not being appreciated or even just maybe to your own extent, you've just overreached, you've just spent yourself, you can start to feel jaded. And so you have to be very intentful. And I'm not just talking about church, because I don't think this is just a church thing. I think it's a general thing. Right. When you're helping family, like I have to be very intentful on to what extent can I help my family. I love my family. I will literally drop everything for my family. And it's sometimes to my detriment sometimes, because I need to get certain things done, and my heart is there, but you have to sometimes set up some boundaries on how much can you help, right?
Right.
Because for me, I've got a full music career. I'm traveling to Miami. I'm traveling, doing all these different things. I don't want, in this instance, my uncle or the pastor to feel like I'm not committed because I'm traveling all the time. Right. So I had to have a conversation with my pastor and say, hey, this is how much I can help. I would love to do it at this level. Right. But also understand that I will be traveling. In between those travel times, I can still help and be involved. But when I'm gone, I'm gone. And I set up the expectation from the beginning. So then when I left for Miami or I left for New York or whatever, the expectation was already set up and there was no issues, because he was like, oh yeah, you've already told me about this ahead of time. I also feel great because then I don't feel guilty about leaving. So it's a whole thing.
Yes.
Whole thing.
And I think that's definitely a lesson I've had to learn about setting expectations and being clear on those up front.
Yes.
Especially when you work with family, right? Because, we can call each other up like in the middle of the night.
Right.
But if it's about work stuff, I
Right.
might get a little pissed off,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, it's a double sword when it's family and church.
Yeah. So, I was much more intentional when I got this position at the church I'm at now, where we actually sat down and went over like clear job descriptions. The first week when I signed on for this position, and I think that helped. And then because it ebbs and flows and it changes,
Right.
you just have to like continue to keep that communication.
Yes.
And I definitely think that the enemy loves to distract us from what God's called us to do.
Yes.
And if he needs to, he can entice you with things that seem good.
Right.
But they might not be the thing that God's calling you to do.
Yes.
And you can't do everything.
You can't do everything.
You have to accept that.
Yeah.
And I think Christine Kane, if I remember correctly.
I love Christine Kane. Oh my
she's
gosh,
so good.
she's my favorite.
Look up her
What
sermons,
a warrior.
But she said, God gives you grace for your race. And that hit me like where I felt like at that time in my life when I heard it, I can't try to run anybody else's race.
Right.
And I needed to step back and say, what have you called me to, God? Where have you anointed me? And what are the things that only I can do?
Right.
That's what I need to focus on.
Yeah.
And as soon as I shifted my mentality to doing that, it's amazing. I started seeing other people come forward and doing things and being able to train them. I mean, I even had students who I started asking for their help with things.
Right.
Hey, can you put together this video for me? Can you come up with choreography for this performance I have coming up and stuff? And they were able to grow in their giftings and being used in a better way because I made room for them.
Right. Exactly.
So, I mean, ultimately, it's pride to think that you can do it all, right?
Right, it is.
Which is never good.
Well, and it's also pride to think that nobody can do it as good as you. Because that's really what it comes down to, right? It comes down to is the reason why I want to do everything is because nobody can do it as well as I can, right? And the real, beyond the pride thing, the real time efficient person realizes that you can teach anybody to be you.
Right.
It's going to take time. So there might be a 6-month lapse where, there's like 4 videos that come out that weren't as good as you would do them or whatever. But what the time efficient person realizes is that after those 6 months and that person is you, you never have to think about it ever again.
Right.
I had to do the same thing with booking. I was booking all these tours and traveling around the world, and I was literally booking 125 shows a year on my own. And while I'd be on tour playing shows, in between sets, I would be sending emails booking shows. Insane. And then with the marketing and all the social media I had to be doing, and then the traveling, I was exhausted from traveling, and then also writing music to be able to tour the music.
Yeah.
I mean, it was too much. And I had a few people who contacted me that wanted to be involved, and they couldn't handle it. They were like, it's too much work for me, I couldn't do it. And then I had one person contact me who, honestly, our interaction with each other, the way we knew each other, was from this program we went to together. Our initial, acquaintanceship with each other, I was not about this person. Like, let's just leave it at that, okay? Like, I wasn't not about them, but like they were a part of this group that the rest of our program called the Clique, and I'm a very inclusive person, and I don't like exclusivity. It makes me mad. It makes me like upset that you're leaving people out. Like, that just makes me mad. And he was a part of that. So I was like, this person.
Hashtag circles.
Yeah, hashtag circles, right. So he was a part of that group, so I was like, man, this guy or whatever. But I really needed the help. Another really close friend of mine was like, no, you should hear his story about that. I think you have the wrong perspective. You were looking, whatever. So I was like, okay, this person vouches for him. Why not? So we start getting involved, and I'm telling him like all the different things. The first I feel bad because I'm throwing Alex under the bus, but the first 50 emails he sent out were trash. Okay, like real bad. I mean, I had already told him ahead of time, like, look, I'll keep booking what I'm doing, but maybe if you book with me, then we'll book more shows together, right? So he texts me one night and he's like, I can't figure out why I don't have, like, nobody's emailing me back. And I'm like, well, send me the email that you sent. So I'm looking at this email. I'm like, dude, you got like 18 enter spaces in this. This email's like 4 pages long. Like, concise it down. You're saying too much in the beginning, like, you know, and I edited it. But what ended up happening after 6 months, after we fixed all these different things, I never had to book a show ever again. He booked everything. Awesome. So delegating is really key, and focusing in on what you're really good at really does open up the opportunity for other people to step in and also shine what they're good at. Yeah. He didn't even know that he was going to be good at booking. He was doing more manager stuff, tour manager stuff, and then he just got into it. So you definitely have to do that, which then leads me into you and photography.
Okay.
So let's get into photography.
Sure.
Because I know it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's a newfound love for you, but it's because you've had, you know, your gear and all the stuff that you've been tinkering around with for 4 or 5 years or so. Yeah. But it's definitely become like a really big source for you, income-wise. So why don't you talk a little about that, how you got started, how it became a hobby and then became something that actually makes money for you. Yeah. Talk about those different things.
Yeah, so I started it because I was going to be having my first Ava, my first little baby, and I just wanted to document her life. And so I got myself a camera, and I started teaching myself primarily just YouTube videos, you know, teaching myself and then practicing and practicing and practicing. But as I started photographing her, or photographing her, I just really enjoyed it, and I started to get better and better at it. Right. And then I started naturally just having people ask me can you take our picture? You know, can you do this and that? And so I'm like, okay, sure. And, you know, at first I remember even doing like several families for free. Yeah. Just, hey, you know, I love doing it. I just want the experience. I want to learn and grow. Right. And, you know, no guarantees of how they turn out, you know, and, you know.
These might be trash, but you get free photos.
Yeah. And you learn a lot along the way. I think just doing that, there's nothing better than actually getting out there and doing it and trying it.
And I will say, you did it for free first. Yep. Everybody, listen to that. You don't because you just have some skill that you're like, maybe half good at, to start charging people right off the bat. A lot of people I have to tell, if you're a photographer and you're bomb, and you're really good, and you're trying to reach out to freaking David Dobrik to take pictures for, under no circumstance should you reach out to any influencer. Even if they're big or small. If you're reaching out to them, do not say what your prices are. You were doing it for free. You're offering a service at first, and then if that person's like, dang, these photos are bomb, what do you actually charge? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like again, people always get this misconstrued. When you're in the beginning, you're learning. Right. You got to do things for free. You got to, even building connections is learning. Right. Building connections with people is learning, and that is all. You're providing a service for them, and hopefully, if they're a good person, they'll promote you back. Yep. That's how it goes down. So continue.
And literally, I think every single family that I did that for always blessed me in some way. Yeah. You know, and that's just how it works. Yeah. But, you know, you don't go in expecting that. Right. So,
which were most of those families from the church too?
Most of them, but I did do some like social media things too, where I opened it up to anybody, and I did like giveaways. Cool. And I got some gigs through that. Cool. Yeah, so
there is a life source to the church, because that's one thing that I found out too. Is like when you have a skill set, and it's something that people can use. The church is like all these people in the church are like, oh yeah, I'll pay you $100 to take photos, and like all of a sudden you have this whole thing of clientele that you didn't even know you had. Okay, so you're tinkering around, you're doing shots for free, and then what happens?
So then over time, you know, obviously you can't do free forever. And, you know, word gets out, and you start getting busier, and you start getting better at it too. Yes. I started, you know, my own photography, like social media pages and stuff. And
at mjoy photos.
Yeah. And, people start getting word of it. So as I got busier and got better, I did start charging. But I always I kind of had a motto from the beginning that I always wanted to, under promise and over deliver.
Yes.
Right? I always wanted my clients to walk away and be blown away.
Yes.
I never want them to be disappointed.
Yes.
Right?
Correct.
So, if I wasn't 100% confident in my abilities, I would honestly be honest about that, and I would charge less. And then if it was something that I felt more confident in, that I knew the kind of work I'd put into it and the kind of quality I would give, then I would charge more.
Yeah.
But
explain that for a second. What would you mean by that? Do you mean something along the lines of that you kill high school photos or family photos, but if somebody an artist came to you, you're like, that's not really my skill set. So explain that further. What does that mean?
So the first time I did a newborn photo shoot, I'd never done that before. And so I straight up told them hey, just so you know, I've done it with my own kids, but I've never done this before. So it's going to be kind of a learning experience for me. And I think it's better to be honest because they're going to see that anyways.
Right.
People aren't stupid, right? So you're going to show up and you're going to kind of be figuring it out and they'll be able to tell anyways. So I'm just always honest about it. And but if you still want me to do it, I would love to just do it for free. And if you feel like you want to bless a little bit back, then that's great. But if not, yeah,
and I think
whatever.
I think that's a motto that goes with everything, right? Church, photos, whatever you're doing, just be honest about where your skill set is.
Yeah,
I think it's smart what you said. Under promise, over deliver.
Yes,
I've never thought about that like that, and I am definitely about to start applying that for sure.
Another thing I do is I always I guarantee a certain result from a photo shoot. So let's say I'm doing a family photo shoot for $250 for an hour. I say, okay, it'll be an hour, and I'll guarantee at least 75 photos. Okay. I always guarantee way less than I know I will produce.
Yes.
So that way I go above and beyond for my clients, and they always feel that generosity from me, and I think they respect that.
Yeah.
Or I'll stay late, and
stay an extra 30 minutes or whatever.
Yeah. Just going above and beyond for your clients, I think it's really important. So yeah, over the years, it's grown into something that now, I'm having to okay, turn people down and move things around with my schedule. But I love photography because I am passionate about it. It's a hobby. And I think that comes across too, which is really important. Be passionate about what you do because people can tell.
How have you balanced something that's a hobby in becoming something that's a job? Yeah. Because that was a really interesting transition for me. Music to me was always a hobby, and I knew I wanted to make it my job and make it full time. But once I got to being full time, what I realized was, and this was just me, somebody actually told me this, which was really smart, really helped me out long term, was your hobby now has become your job, so now you need a new hobby. Because the thing that you used to escape, you no longer have anymore. Yeah. So it's still awesome that it's your full time, right? Because you're like, I'm passionate about this. How great is it that I get to do what I love in an everyday format? But that no longer makes it your hobby anymore. Have you had to transition that or even thought about that?
Yeah. I think I've had to transition the way I look at it and how I go about things and becoming more professional with it throughout the years. So obviously charging is something I've had to become more standard with and whatnot. And knowing what you're worth and being okay to ask for that, was something for me that I had to.
That was hard. That's hard. That's still hard for me.
Yeah.
I feel like too, what I have learned, and I don't think this is everybody. I think, there's different people that have different struggles, but what I have found is most of the time, it's really hard for women to ask for what they're worth. Guys will be like, all my guy musician friends, they're like, no, I charge $1,000. I'm like, you charge $1,000 for a top line? I'm like, I write way better than you. Like, and you're charging $1,000. They're like, yeah, like 9 times out of 10, I just ask and they give that. Now, if I ask and they're like, we don't have that budget, then I'm like, well, what's your budget? And then I can negotiate. And I'm like, what? And it's still even now today, like, I'm a pretty accomplished or a good writer to, I could charge $1,000, but I still don't. So, and I've found with other of my female people, which this is not saying there's not guys that feel the same as us. This is just from my own experience. I don't want to sound sexist or anything because I feel like, if there's no always or nevers, but what I have found is like women really struggle with seeing another competitor of what their photos are, comparing themselves, right? You're like, my photos are just as good as this person. And that person is charging X amount and you charging the same. They're like, well, my photos are good, but like I think that person's overcharging or whatever, and you end up not charging what you're worth. And I think that's hard for creatives too. You never really know what your art is worth as well. But I have found it's really difficult for women.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, ultimately, value is what somebody will pay for it. So I think
true.
Right?
Facts.
Simply put. So I think for me, like I've had to kind of test things out and see, will people pay this much for it? For me, where I'm at right now, how my photos look, they go on my page, they see,
right.
I deliver a certain thing, will they pay that?
Right.
And if my bookings are not keeping up, then I'm
change the price.
too overpriced. Yeah. Then I cut down.
I do the same thing as well.
And then I'll still have people reach out and, oh man, I can't afford that. Is there anything else you offer?
Yeah.
And so I'll give them solutions.
Yeah.
You know what? We can do a half-hour mini session for this price. And does that work for you? Whatever. Yeah. But you don't only get this many photos and whatnot. Yeah. And a lot of times they're really grateful for that. So, you just got to tweak it along the way.
That's part of your owning your own business, right? Like,
right.
A client comes in and says, okay, this is what I have, X amount. Okay, cool. I can provide this, right? And you just kind of adjust along the way. I've had to do that. Like, for some reason, the busiest time of year for me is November, December, and January, which is so backwards for the music industry. Because usually the music industry, once the Thanksgiving hits, it's like dead in the industry. But online, when people want to hire me for songs and top line writing, it is popping. Wow. So I can charge way above my thing because I'm so busy I don't have the time to. Yeah. But then the moment February hits, it's like goes into a ditch and I don't hear from anybody. So then somebody comes and they're like, well, what can you charge? And I'm like, well, I actually have the time. So, $400 or, $500 depending on what the thing is. So you definitely have to adjust, again, you're running a business, right? So you don't have, you're not a mechanic shop where there's 15 other mechanic shops and they all on the same street and they all have the same price tire. It's doesn't necessarily work that way. You will get overpriced. There is capitalism to a certain extent, but you have to adjust with the period of time of your busyness and looking like what you said. Am I overpriced or not? Yeah. So.
Yeah, and I always wanted to be fair, but still give myself what I'm worth. And I want to make sure that it's worth it for me. Like if I'm going to take away several hours out of my week to do the photo shoot, to edit everything, and get the gallery up and send it out and all that stuff. To me, I see that's time invested, time away from other things that I could be doing. So, if it was like $50, $100, maybe it's not worth it for me. Right. And so I have to weigh that up too and make it worth it for me, but also a good value for them.
Yeah. Now, when you're taking pictures of people, my struggle always with pictures is how do you get the right angle for it to look cool? Now, in my experience, because I'm not a photographer, is I just take as many pictures as possible, and then hopefully like
One of
5
them.
of them or out of the 100 like got a really cool angle or shot. But what would you say? Is that your approach as well, or are you like, no, I have like a few angles, like, you know, top or bottom right or like whatever. What would you say in terms of shot, and for a camera and for like an iPhone, because that's like 2 different things, and I think a lot of people are on an iPhone too.
Sure. Well, I mean, angles, there is a science to that, and there's lots of things that I've seen throughout the years. A lot of times, like, you want to be fairly level where it looks realistic for most, like, portraitures and stuff like that. But you guys know, if you can get a little bit up higher, and I'm fairly tall, so typically that's not a hard thing to do, but sometimes you have to stand on a log or something and get up a little bit higher. Then that downward angle can be a little bit more flattering, but you don't want to do it too much so.
Right, because then you look like an anime character.
Right, exactly. And then there's certain things like when you come up, like I've had to where I have like girls like sit down in a field or something like really pretty, and you want it to look a little more soft and feminine, you can go up a lot higher, and that downward angle on a female makes them look a lot more feminine. Whereas with a male, if you want them to look a little bit more stronger or grandiose or whatever, you actually would go a little bit from a downward angle up.
Oh, okay.
And that
it makes them like
feeling.
It also makes them look taller. From the lower angle, it always makes you look taller and like sturdy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Which that makes sense.
And I love doing that even with like little boys. I think it's super cute to have them do like a tough pose. And then I get down like I'm laying on the floor or like super crouched down going up.
It makes me think of that picture of Oakley you did.
Yeah.
Now I know what you did behind the scenes to get that photo.
Yeah.
Oakley's are basically your nephew, but kind of my nephew too.
Yep.
And he just is so cute. Oh my gosh. So
cute.
now I know how you did that photo shoot and that shot of him.
Yeah. So those are some basics, but it depends on, your client and what they're wanting and what that look is.
Right.
Like newborn, you could do, all kinds of different angles. When I do your photos, I think I've even told you this, like, I use all kinds of angles that I normally wouldn't use when I'm doing family portraits.
Yeah.
Because she wants things that are like more edgy and different and outside the box. So like I may get all the way down and like be right by her foot. Right. And shooting up towards her. And it looks really cool and the angles are really neat and edgy, but that would never work in a family photography setting at all.
And what I like when you and I get to do photos too is like, you're outside your comfort zone. I'm taking photos. That's outside my comfort zone, But there's this grace that happens with photography of like we're both outside of our comfort zones, like this almost like a open vulnerability thing. And, we just get to test things out and be fun with it. Yep. And if you get too serious about honestly anything in the creative realm, it really just ruins the vibe. And you're when you and I take shoots or do photos together, it's like you're open to trying new things. You're like, let me try this, I've never done this before, and then sometimes you'll take one and you'll be like, that was horrible. That's not the one. Or sometimes you'll be like, that actually was kind of cool. And then we like look at it together and you'll tell me and direct me to do certain things. Or even like sometimes I'm like, what about this? And it's just a kind of an open communication thing. And as long as nobody's taking themselves too seriously, it ends up being fun. Even though you're slightly uncomfortable or, like for me, I'm always like slightly uncomfortable because I'm taking photos and changing into like 1,000 different outfits. But again, as long as you're just not taking yourself too seriously, I think that is what helps a lot.
Yeah. And I've always enjoyed like the photography process, like from that perspective of building relationships and making memories. A lot. It's one of the things that appeals to me the most about it. So I would say almost every photo shoot, my clients are always like nervous or maybe even stressed. They come and like the mom's just gotten the 4 kids ready and they're like barely holding it together, and then one spilled juice on their shirt and then the other one's mad about having to wear a button up, and you know, it's normally an actually stressful thing for most families.
Right.
So my job is to make them feel at ease, and you know, most people, not everybody, but most people don't like getting their picture taken.
Yeah.
They'll still do it because they want the memories,
right?
But they don't like it. So my job is to make them feel at ease, make them feel comfortable, and to have fun. So for me, like I almost always say up front, you know, look, like I'm in no rush.
Yeah,
we're just gonna have a good time,
right?
And we're gonna make some memories, and we're gonna get lots of great candid shots. Like I always tell my clients that I live for candid shots. So like that's what they're gonna get a ton of for me. So I think just having a good time and doing that, and then encouraging them too. Like it's amazing how, you know, when I do family portraits, I always do individuals as well. And I really try to insist on doing an individual shot of every single person.
Right.
And that will get some people to get a little like nervous.
Yeah.
And I think ladies in particular.
Yeah.
But
no, Mom. Jesus. Ladies in particular.
Yeah, I think ladies in particular. So they'll get a little nervous, and when you just like simply tell me, "Oh my goodness, that looks so beautiful."
Yeah.
Wow, like you have no idea how good these are turning out. You know, just little encouragement like that. It's amazing how they instantly light up.
Yeah.
And it instantly gives them that boost of confidence.
Yes.
And it just makes for a better picture, and it makes for a better experience for everybody.
So be a cheerleader. If you're in photography, be a cheerleader. Or if you have a photographer, make sure that they're cheering you on. I definitely would say, like, I'm not even a words of affirmation person. And even when I'm in that situation, like, it does ramp me up a little bit because I'm like, oh, okay, what I'm doing actually does look good.
Yep.
You know, and it's because you don't really know what's happening behind the lens. You know, you don't always get to see like what the shot was or the angle was, which is in some point like really important because, you know, you don't need to, as a photographer, show the people the 5 crappy ones and then the 4 good ones, right? Like people are going to be like, that'll add to the insecurity.
Right.
But you know, again, you don't know what's going on behind the lens. So it's just always, even if the photos are crappy, just be like, oh, these are looking really good.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden somebody lights up and you get that sparkle in their eye, and then boom, that's where when you get to capture it, you know?
Yeah.
And so how have you translated, okay, so now you've had photography, right? You've been doing photography for a while, but then that also ended up translating to you doing marketing and photography for the church. So talk a little bit about, first I would say talk about the importance of marketing. How have you found that that's really helped the church? And then also relate to how you take different photos and different things for the church, because that's different than your personal, like we talked about.
Right.
The portraits is different than when you shoot for me,
Yeah.
which is also different than when you shoot for the church. The church is more bright, you know, whatever. So talk a little bit about that.
So marketing is very important, and I think sometimes in a church setting it can have a negative stigma. Because you're not like selling a product, right? Like you're trying to witness to people and bring them to the Lord. So it's a whole different mindset.
I'd be like, that's a product. Me and my business mind, I'm like,
is
you're selling the Lord. Like people need to buy into Jesus. You know.
But I think you really have to see it as a ministry, and sometimes you know, being in like the media realm of church, you can kind of dissociate from the ministry aspect because you don't have that interaction. You know, it's different from doing like youth ministry,
right?
Where you're actually like discipling people one-on-one and like preaching and like talking to them. So you have to see it now as, I think, a ministry, a huge ministry. Like now more than ever, everything is online.
Right. Oh, everything.
And it is so essential. And there's been tons of people that have come to the church through hearing things online, on social media. We run ads for major events on Facebook, Instagram, and those always bring in people. And you think just one of those people, it could be life-changing.
Right.
For them to be able to come into the church and hear about God and turn their lives around.
So true.
So it's so worth it.
Yeah.
To me, and so important. So I think it's just talking to your pastors too, and like opening their perspectives about that.
Yes.
And then saying, okay, what can we do?
Yeah.
Can we run a $40 ad?
Right.
For Easter?
Right.
What is our budget? What can we do?
Or can we even start an Instagram account? Because that's a thing too. Some churches they don't even want to do that. They think social media is, quote unquote, of the devil or whatever. Which to me, if you think that place is so dark, how much better is it for you to shine your light there?
Yeah,
for you to be a platform, to be a light in a what you consider to be a dark place,
right?
I think that's really smart. But beyond that, even convincing your elder team, pastor, X, Y, and Z down the line of starting a social media page, multiple ones, and get that off the ground and seeing if they're even open to that. And sometimes that's even a battle.
Yeah.
For some churches, that's a battle to get that going, and because a lot of people just don't understand social media, and some pastors are older and they don't really understand the whole connection about the whole thing. I mean, even this year for TPC, we've really worked on big social media things, and we've had to sit down with even Caleb, who's how much older is Caleb than you?
2
years.
Older,
so, and I think he's 5. I think around 5 years older than me. So, Caleb, who's considered, I think, a millennial. Is he a millennial? Yeah. We've had to sit down with him and been like, look, here's some different things, and this is something that we know we can do.
Right.
And it would be successful if we were consistent about it. And so it's just, again, setting expectations, having those conversations where you need to have them.
And you may not have, the media team of a big mega church and be able to pull off the amount of content they're putting out and the quality and consistency that they have. But again, looking at what can we do, and whatever we do, let's do it well.
Yeah. Exactly.
I don't like doing things.
Yeah, that's me and Micah are always on the same page. Yeah, me and Micah are always on the same page where it's like, if we're going to do it, we don't want to half do it.
No,
and not everybody is like that. And so Micah and I always are like on the same team of, look, okay, cool, you want to do it? Great. This is how we need to do it. And sometimes people are like, no, it's fine to do it this way. And me and Mike are like banging our heads like, no, you can't do it that way. Oh, it's just so frustrating. But again, that's in any workplace, you have to balance different personalities, different perspectives, and all those different things. Nothing changes. And I think a lot of times when people get involved in a church, they think that all of a sudden those things should disappear because it's a church. Right. And that's not the case. Everybody's different. They have different backgrounds, different things. If you were in the workplace and somebody said something to you, you would probably just brush it off and be like, that person's having a bad day. So why are you not applying those same things to the church? Just because it's a church is a group of people. Yeah. So that collectively, imperfect people that collectively make a foundation of a place where people can come and fellowship. So it's just really important that you understand that about the church, and then you don't feel upset then. Right. So talk a little bit about your vision in marketing. Okay. Because you've had obviously, like, you are the marketing person at the church. And talk a little bit about, like, one, the vision or idea that you had, right? Getting the team on board. But also coming up with that vision. Like, you know, creativity comes from a lot of different places. Ben and I argue about this all the time. He's like, I can only be creative at night. And I'm like, okay, first of all, you can be creative at any time of the day. Inspiration does come at random times, but it also can be called upon.
Yes.
To a certain extent. But that's always the argument, right? Like
Definitely.
inspiration just has to God has to touch his little
Yes.
finger on my head or whatever. And you're like, okay, there's a combination of both here. You can be diligent and inspiration will come in that diligency, but also there are times when you wake up in the middle of the night, you're like, what's this song in my head? Let me get a voice memo.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about how you've kind of determined your different visions for the church and then, you managing all the different personalities and trying to get everybody on board with that vision.
Yeah, well, when I first got this position, one of the things that I wanted to do right away was establish a brand look and make a cohesive have a cohesive vision and look for all of our platforms. And I mean, if you look at some other big churches and what they're doing, say you take Elevation Church, you just associate orange with that church. Yeah. Right?
That's so true.
You do. Because you see it everywhere on all their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's part of their logo and even just a lot of their posts will use that color.
Yeah.
And so I started trying to figure out, why is that?
Right.
One, it helps people recognize that that's from you.
Yeah.
But two, and it starts to get them more familiar.
Right.
It gives a familiarity to your name. But two, there's different sciences behind colors, and certain colors create different messages. Mm-hmm. So, one of the things I did early on was I talked to the pastors and I said, okay, I want to go with a certain coloring look. And this is going to be something that affects my photography, my graphic design, my social media posts, everything. So, not that everything is only going to be those colors. Right. But I want to see those throughout most of my stuff. So, I talked to them about it, and they were already using a lot of blues and teals and things.
I was gonna say every time I think of TBC, I think of blue.
Yeah, and they were really stuck on for sure using that, and blue is very calming. And reassuring and trustworthy of a color. So I liked the message of it. And then just thinking through logistically, our lighting on stage is blue or purple.
Bluish purple.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, you know what? What if I just go with that? Because all the pictures I take of us on stage are already going to have those in the background.
Yeah. Which this is so funny to me about creatives is we talk about colors. This is how you know you're creative when you're blue has this calming, trustworthy of a color. It's we're giving human attributes to colors, but this is so the creative world. This is so what it is, and you do have to understand that a lot of people don't connect the logical to the emotional. They think that it's just one or the other, right? And what we're learning more and more in psychology and science is that those things are very connected. Yeah. And so the arts now is becoming, or the creative realm is becoming a lot more validated because we do speak like this. Yes. And we speak in the way of there's a reason why most people, when you ask what their favorite color is, they say blue. There's a reason for that, you know what I mean? And what is the reason? So anyways, continue. I just thought that was so funny. As creatives, we always talk about, I had a girl in a session, we were writing together, and she goes, I said, so what are you feeling about this song, lyric wise? She goes, I don't know, I just feel purple. And I'm okay, and I'm me trying to decipher what that even means, and she was a very feeler creative type, and I'm more head logic brained, but I was trying to navigate what does purple mean, whatever. So, but sorry, continue. I just think it's so funny. We're talking about colors.
So once we decided our color palette, I use Canva a lot for graphic design, and we have a business account with them. And when I first got on my position, really there wasn't a social media team. It was just everybody was kind of trying to post things. So you literally had several people that
posting
were
different
just
stuff.
Yeah, and everybody posted their own style and their own way of doing it.
Right.
And then you'd even have people that would post at the same time, like the same thing, but in a different way.
Right.
You know, so I took it over at first, just me, like, hey, can we get everyone to just sign off
Right.
and let me just run it for a little bit and establish the overall look that we're wanting. I went on Canva and created my brand palette. So I chose like the several shades of colors that I wanted for our brand on our account. I didn't even know you
could do that on Canva. That's cool.
Yeah. I think it's only like $7.99 a month too. It's like really cheap.
Let me get that login info.
So we had our like brand colors established, and then you can actually set up your brand fonts too.
Cool.
So I came up with several that we all agreed on. You know, I talked about it with the pastors and show them and whatnot. So we have like basic ones that are in a lot of our stuff, and then we have like other accent ones.
Sure.
Some that are more like
Right.
kitty, some that are more men, some that are more like female,
right,
whatever.
And if you're not understanding why she's saying that because within a church there's different ministries. So you have the women's ministry, the men's ministry, the kids ministry, right? And so having different fonts that are associated with those ministries will connect better, right? If you have more of a manly font and you're trying to produce the women's potluck, like that's like, not to say that a font is going to determine the whole thing, but it sometimes can. And you could look at that and be like, you know, a lot of times people don't know what's wrong with the post, but they know that they feel something wrong with it, and so then they'll just decide no.
They just keep scrolling.
You'll just keep scrolling. So your whole goal is that you want it to feel right so that they stop for a second and be like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then maybe they stop by and then they end up coming to the church or whatever the things, you know, so.
Yeah. And then even though we'll change like those main fonts, like say we have one for the men, one for the women's, whatever, like the complementary fonts we'll have for like subtitles will be the same.
Cool.
It'll be like a standard, so that way there's that continuity.
Sure.
And then, of course, with the colors, you have some sort of continuity as well. And then our overall, like, look and what we want. So it's just talking about it with the team and seeing, like, you know, what we want to do. And I remember learning early on the 80-20 rule.
Yes.
Right? Where, like...
Love the 80-20 rule.
You can't have your clients feel like you're always pushing sales. Right?
Right.
And this works in a church too. You wouldn't think so, but it's the same thing in a church. You can't just be always pushing events.
Yes.
Right? Like the people want to feel like you care about them and that you genuinely want to minister to them. So having up, you know, just like inspirational quotes and little encouragements, scriptures, or just check-ins, like any prayer requests that we can pray for you today, and things really like that. That makes them want to engage with your post more and check in with you a lot more.
They naturally want to engage with it. If you put a post up that says, hey, our team is meeting today, we want to pray for whatever you need prayer for, comment below what you need prayer for. And then people are just naturally gonna, unless they don't want to expose themselves to a certain extent, but naturally people are gonna be like, hey, I have a sick cousin, or I've got a, you know, aunt that's still, I'm praying for her to be saved, or whatever the situation is.
Right.
And that applies to artists and their artist page, right? Like, I can't post 10 posts in a row that say, listen to my music. People aren't interested in that. Like, honestly, the posts about my music are my least, have the least exposure, ironically enough. And you would think with a page that's about music that would be the one that people want the most. Usually the ones that people like the most music-wise are the ones that I like took a random video in my car and I'm like, yo, listen to this song I just wrote. And then people are like, oh my God, I like that song. And they naturally comment. Or like, you know, just doing a random post of saying, this week has some really great things. Here's some great things that are going on. Or, hey, my favorite candy, Sour Patch Kids. Anybody else not like chocolate? Like, and then all these people comment that don't like chocolate. And then what happens is then you cultivate a community that has similar values, similar ideas.
Yeah.
And
True.
and then these people just tend to naturally want to interact with what's going on.
Right. And especially now, too, with so many people being online only. I mean, we have a lot of people that attend the church that we don't ever see in person anymore right now. So it's even more important to feel that connection with them and to reach them in a personable way, even though it's virtually.
Yes.
And, we do Zoom meetings and like go live on IGTV, sometimes and things like that. But there's lots of different ways, but you want to always feel like you're trying to make that personal connection with them, that you care about them.
Yeah.
So that 80-20 rule is like 4 out of your 5 posts should not be sales oriented.
Yes.
Right? So for the church, if like what I like to do when I'm on top of things, which doesn't always happen, but what I like to do is like in the beginning of the month, plan all my event posts for the month.
Yes.
Right? So I use a website called Later, and I schedule them all in there. I can schedule stories and posts and do all my captions, everything ready to go.
I use Creator Fund.
Okay.
Another option. It's actually cool. Facebook has created their own version of scheduling posts now, and now you can schedule your Instagram and Facebook posts through there for free. Cool. Actually now. So that's what I use, which I love. But continue. Later is another one. Hootsuite is another one. There's a few options that you guys will have.
Okay. But so, oh my gosh, if you're not doing that yet,
please get on it.
You have to do that.
Such a game changer.
So if I plan all of those event posts first, right? Then I look at my calendar overall and I'm like, okay, those are a lot of posts already about those events. So now I can speckle in all the other posts that are going to bring me the other 80%.
Yes.
So that's what I start with, those mandatory ones that have to be on at a certain date and all this different stuff. Yeah. And then I go back and I add all the other.
Yeah. And I think, the 80-20 rule applies to so many things. It's really something that you do have to apply in your business because you are trying to have a business which requires money, right? And I think we sometimes get so caught up on the product or what we're trying to push that we forget that like people don't want to see that all the time.
Right.
People just want to see like Nike doesn't push their product that hard on commercials, right? Like, I can't even think of the last Nike commercial I saw, which I'm sure I've seen one recently, but can't think of it. But you know what I have seen? I've seen every freaking celebrity wearing their stuff and them reposting just the fact that some celebrity's wearing their stuff.
Right.
And they didn't have to inadvertently tell me to go buy Nike. Now I see this person, celebrity that I admire, and I want to buy it. So it's just thinking of creative ways that maybe make people think about your product, but you don't have to explicitly tell them about your product.
Right.
People don't want to go onto your page and see the 50 posts of you pushing your hip hop song. Like, right. You know what I mean? Download, like in the big bold letters. Like, oh, that stuff drives me nuts. But it's also moving on to like the 80-20 rule, like in another aspect, and this is something that I've been really trying to hone in on the last couple of years, and it's really difficult for me because I'm such a yes person. I'm such a person that when somebody needs help or somebody wants something done, I'm like, oh yeah, I can do it. But what people talk about is 20% of the things you do yield 80% of your profit. So you have to be really intentful on what you're saying yes to. Because I say yes to a lot of things that don't yield me 80% of my success. So, for instance, I love riding with people, right? At any level. It doesn't matter if, you're at the same level as me, lower, higher, doesn't matter. And I try to, as best as I can, not let somebody's level in their career determine on if I want to write with them. But sometimes when I have sessions for Pitbull or Beyonce or Cool and Dre, I have to prioritize certain things because that 20% is going to yield me my 80.
Right.
And unfortunately, sometimes I have to say no to those. Not to say that you have to say no to all of them. I don't say no to all of them. I actually probably say yes more than most people. But you have to be very intentful on what you're saying yes to. And this is more of like you're further in your career kind of thing. This is not a beginning thing. When you're in the beginning, say yes to everything.
Yeah. Sure.
You're learning. You need to say yes to everything. You're building connections, whatever. This is more like you've been in the game for 7 years, 8 years, 10 years, whatever plus. And now you're trying to basically, in essence, I always say it's like jumping the Grand Canyon. Like you've got these things, people are cutting your songs or whatever, but you're trying to get the big one. And to get the big one, you've got to focus on that 20%. That 20% is where it's at. So that's another way of viewing the 80-20. Hers is more about like the sale. Don't push people to your product more than 20% of the time. Mine on the other 20%, 80-20 is like focus on the 20% that is yielding you the most in return.
Yeah.
So,
that's good.
Well, I'm so happy you came on here.
Hey,
I think there's a lot of little nuggets in here that people will be able to utilize. And again, just a little synopsis of what we've talked about. Creatives have multiple avenues of revenue. We wear a lot of hats, but if you're working in a church, you are most likely going to wear multiple hats. If you're working in a church full time, definitely. If you're doing what I do, I only quote unquote work on Sundays, and I make my little side cut off of that. And that just ends up being one revenue for me. But with Micah's like more of a full time, and then she has her other side hustles that collectively make her full income, which seems to really work for her. So, and then definitely take her photography tips. The angle thing, I'm definitely going to try different like angles and things that she talked about. It's really, really smart. I think it'll help your guys' branding and all of that stuff. If you have one thing that you would leave people away with, what would it be?
Oh, gosh. The first thing that came to my mind is editing is everything. And
I like that.
Don't be afraid to use presets.
Ooh. Yeah, we didn't even really get into editing.
We didn't get into everything.
We might need to do another one. This is already like, an hour long? We didn't get into everything, but maybe next time. Yeah.
But, I mean, just Google presets.
Yes.
Like, whatever kind of presets you're wanting. Portrait presets, newborn photography presets, whatever. Google it and look at your options. Pay the $200 for a good one and adjust it to be exactly what you want.
Wow.
And then that's your formula. And then when you have different clients, you just tweak as needed. So you have an overall cohesive look. Saves a lot of time, and it makes your quality go up a tremendous level. Huge game changer.
Well, there you go. Editing is everything.
Is everything.
And presets are everything, in essence. We're using I've been doing a lot of math lately, the transitive property here. All right, guys, have a great week. We will see you next week. Well, I will. Micah won't. But we'll be sure to have Micah back on and just talk about more things. So thank you, Micah, for coming. Seriously, this is so great. And it's fun. I always love when I get to mix business and family. That's what makes it the best. So see you guys next week. Peace.
Bye.